This is somebody you probably all know. Um, he's not in the public quite as much as he used to be, but he's one of our great heroes.
I want to congratulate Colgate for the job they are doing in educating young Americans for positions of leadership. And I'm especially pleased to have an evening with not only students but members of the community who come together to be part of this university family. People will still say to me, we're glad you're occupied, and you're also up at your center at the City College of New York, the Powell Center, my alma mater. But it can't be the same as being the Secretary of State. It just can't be the same. You gotta miss it. And my response is, I don't miss anything in life. I like to go through life looking through the front windshield, never through the rear view mirror or the side mirrors. There's nothing I can do about what is behind me. I want to see things new and different and interesting, whether it's information technology or youth programs, but I always want to be looking out the front windshield of life, never behind me. For my young friends and students here, remember, as you get involved in student organizations, or when you leave here, you will become responsible for people, your followers, your subordinates. Remember that they get the work done, and the role of a leader is to put people, human beings, in the best possible environment to achieve the purpose of the organization you're a part of. How do you go about doing that? At Fort Benning and throughout my career, they focused on just a couple of very simple things. One, have a clear sense of purpose, have goals, have a mission. Goals and mission are pretty good words. You see them all the time. You see them in PowerPoint presentations. But the word I prefer is have a purpose. The organization has to have a purpose. That's a more driven word. So when you take over an organization, whether it's an office of 3 or an army of 3 million, make sure you convey throughout the organization a sense of purpose. What are we here for? What do we do not just to make money? What do we do to make this a better society? And the best leaders I've known are those who can convey this sense of purpose down to every single person in an organization. The second thing they taught us was take care of the troops. Take care of the followers. They will get the job done for you. Train them, give them the skills they need. Make sure they're ready for the task ahead. Give them the equipment they need, whether they're weapons, computers, knowledge, whatever they need to get the job done. If you're a real leader, you'll make sure they have what they need, and you will never look away from those needs. You will not only talk the talk, you'll walk the walk with them. Make sure that you also commend them when they have done good things. And it's not just a matter of promotions or salaries. Sometimes it's nothing more than, I'm so proud you're a part of my team. But if you want to be a leader, you've also got to be ready to discipline people and fire people when they're not getting the job done. Don't work around them. Don't give the work to somebody else. The good followers know who the bad followers are, and they're waiting for you to do something about it. So my young friends, make sure you develop the fortitude to be realistic and not turn away from problems, but to deal with problems when they come along. And if it means hurting someone's feelings for the good of the organization, you have to train yourself to be able to do that. But it's all about human connections, all about conveying to the followers that you believe in them, you're going to support them, and we are all in this together.
So there you have one of our great leaders from the recent past, and he has that constant mantra about taking care of the people that work for him. So let me check and make sure that, because I know a couple more people have come in. Nago. let me check off the names here that I haven't been able to pick up. Jose Alvarado. Courtney Cofield. I see her now.
I'm here.
Tuba Hassan. Yeah, I see you.
Here.
Okay. Mariana Martinez.
Hello, I'm here.
Okay. And open your screen if you can, please. Angela Navarrete. Navarrete,
Hello.
where are you? Oh, I still don't see you. Angela Navarrete. Okay. Maricela. Justin Ramos. I know he's here somewhere. Yeah, he's up
Yeah,
in
I'm right here.
the right-hand corner. Esmeralda. There you are. That's Esmeralda Rosales, right? Okay. And Renee Sanchez. Cesar Soto. That's the last one on my list now.
Yeah,
Okay.
right here.
See you, Cesar. Okay. Today we've got the first of the case studies that we're going to have, and this is Lumiscape. I've specifically selected it because it's easy from the perspective. It's not easy to come to a conclusion as to what the company should do, but it's easy from the perspective that it's a binary decision. You go one way or you go the other. And I'm going to ask you to take off and do this this afternoon. Not really knowing that much about how to set up a strategy or what are the things that have to be considered in putting together a good strategy. We will start looking at that in the very next class, but I wanted to get your feet wet with this one. So would somebody like to start off and just, and at this point, just say where you think you would be going if you were the president of this company.
I'll go ahead and speak. Oh, go ahead. I'll go after.
Oh, okay.
John, who's going? Jonathan or Nago?
I'll go. You said, where do I stand and what decision I would make for Lumiscape, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So after reading the study case, I think that Lumiscape has a good decision towards a subscription strategy, but turning down 3 million or one of their biggest sales to Houston, I would take that deal and then I would try to convert them into a subscription later, just because it's such a big deal and move for them. So that's what I would go for, even though even though they're trying to change their strategy a little bit, I would still take it and then deal with it later.
Okay, now let's make a list of the things that were considerations for you in coming to that conclusion.
Okay, so as far as subscription strategy, I think it was a good way for the company to turn around how they're moving, because of the fact that most of their customers aren't maintaining such that they're not maintaining their street lights. So I agree with the subscription that that deals with them fixing and providing such a service. But as far as not selling streetlights no longer to Houston as they anticipated, because they I'm sorry, hold on. Okay, so sorry. So just because of the fact that Houston took so long for their government or whatever to agree to buy another 5,000 flashlights, I agree that I think that if they would have said, oh, let's offer a subscription instead, then they would have taken even longer and potentially have lost the deal for that 3 million deal of 5,000 more. So I think overall their move to subscription strategy is good. But as far as like I mentioned before, a huge deal like this, I wouldn't turn it down. And I know Cameron the CEO, went back and forth and really thought about it. But in my position, I would have taken it.
Okay, good. So we got some rationale for making the decision you do. Now, does somebody want to either add on to what Nago has to say
Yeah.
or take the other
I go
side?
next, and if it's full, if I can like piggyback off of you after that.
What was that?
So I was like, if you wanted to go next, if I
Oh,
could
yeah.
piggyback off of you like after that.
Okay. So I believe that the company should stick with a consistent message. So if they go back and forth, they made the strategy of turning into a subscription, right? They go back to sales, they're kind of going back and forth and they're just not showing consistency of the company, and image rating is probably going to go down. I believe because it's such a big sale, like 3 million, it's 5,000 LED lights. I believe that they should like make a way to sell them this product, but as a subscription. So because it's such a big sale, they could sell it as a subscription, and they'll add, the maintenance, the updates, the installation, and things like that. And then informing Houston, like, from now on, it's a subscription. We're gonna take this as a form of subscription payment, like a upfront deal, and just go about that, because it's important to keep the message within the company consistent, and going back and forth kind of doesn't allow that. So in the actual case study, it talks about how doing a hybrid route is going to confuse future customers, because it's showing that there's two options, and most of the time they're going to go to the path with least resistance, and that's a straight buy rather than a subscription. But they're knowing that the company's goal is to not sell lights, it's to sell safe parks, safe streets. So their goal, their morale isn't so much in sales, but what the company itself represents, So they need to think of a way to make this sell, because it's the biggest one they're ever going to get, and make it into some sort of subscription. So the first time deal, probably, try to do like a hybrid form. After that, they're going to be a subscription, That's my opinion on it.
Okay. Very good. You got some good rationale there. Brianna?
To kind of add to that, I believe that the primary issue with, firstly, you're leaving $3 million on the table if you don't take it. So trying to figure out a way to bend, but not really bend so much to the fact that whoever writes a big enough check can literally change the entire structure of how you're doing business. That becomes an issue, because let's say they go to a pure selling strategy once again, they convert back. They started as sales, went to subscription to return back to sales for the sake of securing this $3 million deal, is going to just, much like Jonathan was saying, is going to convey this message of like, if the check's big enough, we just, we're virtually spineless with regard to how we run our company. Now, what I do think at the end there of the case study, they discussed perhaps a prepaid subscription, kind of trying to meet in the middle, like, hey, you've got this money you have to spend that's been allotted to you by the government, kind of as a means of like, we've been waiting on this deal from you for 5 years. We've had the product, but you didn't have the money, but we can't convert what we've done because you weren't ready. So to kind of meet on just even a pure business standpoint, we can do this, but it's going to be a subscription based. Now, if you can't maintain it past that $3 million prepaid subscription, that's going to have to become like another conversation down the line, and perhaps well before that, I would hope that their subscription would end. But again, it's just, you can't, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of, do we leave $3 million on the table? They said they pulled it roughly, I believe, $30 million in revenue up to that point the year before. So it's not like they're not making money, but it's also, to be progressive. This is their largest deal to date. And it could send out a really good message to say, hey, we can handle big orders like this. We can handle a $3 million order for the streetlights. That comes with maintenance. It comes with updates. It comes with all of these extra things that, and a technological, you know, technology, oh man, just a technology that can develop over time. So it's not something that's going to be stagnant. It's not like a waste of money. It's a long-term investment for the quality of your city. And again, like Jonathan said, you're investing in experiences. You're investing in a safe park, a safe street, you know, that kind of thing. So kind of selling it to them as that too, like don't miss out on bettering your city on account of it not being a straight purchase. You know, we're still meeting you in the middle and you're still going to be able to spend the money necessary. So it is a fine line, but I think the best way to try to meet them is to meet them with prepaid subscription, so they don't have to think about it for what seems to be several years at the very minimum, and then reevaluate that contract upon the time that it's coming to a close of that subscription.
Now, Brianna, are you willing to put the deal at risk in order to try and get that subscription model sold or incorporated or used?
I think that it's a bold risk, but it's kind of the concept of high risk, high reward. If you don't take the risk of sticking to your guns, and let's say now you're creating that hybrid model, hypothetically, you're running the risk of confusing your market. So now you got the $3 million deal, but you're potentially canceling out all this future business on account of you can't translate your business correctly. So it's meeting conversation with regard to like with business and your person who's trying to buy your service, buy or subscribe your service in any capacity, communicating that you very well have an intention, you know, that there's something that you're going to have to uphold. Now, it's not to say that, you know, be rude and be benign and disrespectful or condescending during that conversation, but realistically, you won't be able to do that at every turn. Let's say California said, well, hey, we want 10,000 of those lights. We're a massive state. That's twice the deal virtually, right? But they can't flip-flop constantly. You can't keep doing that. There's no consistency. There's no clarity. And in the long run, if you're talking about longevity of your business, which is what most business people would, you know, argue they want from their business, you can't expect inconsistency to translate to longevity. It's just not realistic.
Okay, so you would be in the same camp with Rapallo that consistency, and that's one of my 4 favorite words, you know, is more important than the deal. Potentially that you would you would be willing to walk away.
Yeah, if should it have come to that, and if anything, it may make them reconsider, like, oh wow, they're really what, maybe we should consider something else, because if they're willing to walk away from 3 million, maybe there's something on the table that the buyer's leaving, you know, so it makes them reevaluate the conversation.
If I may add, you can also, like how she said, you know, meet them in the middle, have that conversation with them. You're informing them that, you know, you guys because it states in the case study that they talked, right? But they lagged so long that they were at the bottom of the list. So them returning, they could be like, look, we changed our, you know, our sales strategy. We're now a subscription, but this benefits you and this is how. So we're going to take your form of payment as a prepaid subscription, and we're going to give you all the benefits of a subscription. It's more of a like letting them know this is what's going to happen, rather than giving them, oh, do you want to go route A or route B? You know, if you set the road for them, they're most likely to take it because they'll take the route that's least resistant, which is if you have it set up for them, you show them all the variables and they like it, they're going to take it, you know?
And you're maintaining a relationship too on top of that by like, hey, like, yeah, you took forever, but we're still down to make this deal for you. But we got to do some stuff on our side. We can't just like bend and break because you wanted to come back 5 years later, but we're still down to service you 100% and maintain it for you, because they already proven that within the case study that they're not even maintaining what they're buying. So yeah, it's way easier arguably to do a straight purchase, but then it's a headache later because you're getting complaints to the city constantly about streetlights not even working, as opposed to just paying for the subscription, and it's prepaid, no less, which is a service you can offer them. Be like, hey, we don't do this, prepaid it, and we'll maintain it on your behalf as well and provide the updates. So there's a lot, I feel like, as with regard to a selling point, like you can really you can do that subscription. It does run the risk of losing it, but I feel like it's a risk worth taking, arguably, for the likelihood that they'll take it, I feel like is high.
If I may add on
Okay.
to that too, I
Yeah.
also feel, I personally feel like only reason why I was to the subscription to myself is because like I feel like how the company is trying to maintain, like how they said they're trying to be consistent on what they want to sell and what they want to do. And the whole entire problem with them even switching over to this brand was because, you know, the installations wasn't working in certain places, maintenance wasn't working in certain places. So, and I feel like with Texas, throughout the whole entire process in the case study, they have shown to be inconsistent customers. So why would I want to even do a deal with the inconsistent customers when it took them years to even get back to me? And with the lights that I sold them, in the case study, they said they didn't even necessarily set up all of them correctly, and they didn't even set all of them up in time. So why even sell more of my street lights to this customer who's inconsistent and could also possibly bring my brand down? Because if the lights aren't working and people are complaining about the lights, my brand is already taking a major impact on just that by itself. So there's no point in me as me as a buyer, or me as a seller, to even sell to this customer if they're inconsistent in almost everything they do.
I agree.
That's a good point. Now, who's
Oh.
Bree again?
Oh no, that was Zachary. But no, I was just saying I agree. Like that's 100% true. Like you're inconsistent, but you want me to mess my whole system up because you just decided to come back 5 years later with $3 million. Like there's money comes and it goes in the same capacity that you didn't have it then and now you have it now. Like I can't flip because you are able to write a check today, but you may not be able to in 3 more. Like it doesn't translate well business wise in my brain.
Professor, just to add on to that, so my decision was highly made on, part of it was that Houston did take 5 years, but I know that came down to budgeting reasons, which we know lots of cities, states, especially now, budgets kind of change all over the place. So, they're clearly sold on the idea, and I get why so it went from a sales to a subscription model because they want to take more control of their product and their branding, which makes sense because as he saw, there were so many issues, not necessarily that the product was faulty, but more that the buyers were not executing their installations. So it makes sense that they would want to go to subscription, so their model and their brand looks better, right? So in this case, the subscription, I think the best approach would be to educate them on why the subscription makes sense. I definitely don't think they should leave 3 million on the table, especially since they're already sold on the idea of the product. I would just personally think it makes sense to just educate them on that the subscription does add more value. And I get why Lumiscape wants to go, because it also brings in more steady revenue for them than just, doing a one-time sell. And a subscription just keeps them stable as a company. And I think another idea was the fact that the case study mentioned, like, kind of government has a way of purchasing, and one of the CEOs said you really don't want to get in the way of their purchasing the way they purchase. You kind of just want to learn how to work with it so you can gain the revenue.
Yeah, it's interesting. People in government that are doing purchasing or making commitments want to study it to death before they have to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big things that I have done for the last 30 years is I do work in prison. And so every year I'll spend maybe 12 days in a prison. And of course, last March, we got completely shut out. And we don't know how long it's been a full year, and we don't know how quickly we're going to be able to get back in. because we know nobody's going to want to make a decision, particularly if either we spend time in prison and one of us gets COVID, who's going to get sued? And if we go in and an inmate gets COVID, what's going to be the reaction to the CDCR, the California prison system, for having let somebody in who could bring COVID in with them? And so we're thinking it's going to be another year before we can get back in jail. That's harder to get in than it is to get out nowadays. I'd like to hear some other people. This is one of the chances that you really get a chance to add to your an important part of your grade.
I'll go. So
Okay.
this is Caesar.
Yeah.
So I was going with the decision of taking the deal just because of how they were saying that it's a government, so you don't really know what their budgets are. Well, I guess you could find out, but they probably have employees doing all this maintenance. So if they go with the subscription, they're going to have to fire a lot of people. So I kind of agree with the CFO, how he said to sell to their clients and then kind of father in the subscription model. Because I don't think, I think if they just service them and then they start the relationship after this, and maybe later on they can teach them the subscription model. But if they already have their budget for buying the lights and they already have employees that are taking care of these lights and selling them, I don't think it'll be easy to convince them to do your subscription model at this time. So I think taking that deal would be good, and then kind of just maintaining a relationship and maybe later on turning to subscription.
Okay. Very good.
I'll go too.
Okay. Taylor.
I'm going off of the not getting rid of the 3 million, taking the 3 million from Houston, but also putting in the subscription model too. I really liked one of the segments in the case study when it talked about how the subscription model would help cities that needed it with their finances. I really like that to create like a sustainable market. And that would also create more value to customers, which would also create more of a sustainable income for the company too. I also I wrote a lot of notes. Let me see. I liked how Lumiscape products were designed to gather all sorts of data, including humidity, motion, seismic activity, and UVA and UVB ambient light. So I find that that's kind of becoming like a trend now, for climate change to prevent that. And if Lumiscape's doing that, that would also create for more of a sustainable future too. So going back to the 3 million, I think that not taking that away from, taking the 3 million from Houston would be good and fathering that in, but also it would overall create a sustainable future too through those ideas that we're doing.
Good.
Sorry, I had a lot in my head. It's coming out.
Well, I would hope that all of you do have a lot in your head as you read these, because the whole objective is to get you to think, well, if we choose A, well, what happens to B? What's it going to do? Like Zach said, are you going to bring down your brand if you?
Yeah.
I did have a kind of like food for thought though for the whole class. That do you think it would make more sense? Because Caesar had a good point. Like with budget cuts, a lot of people tend to lose their job, or if how they kind of say like robots are replacing certain jobs. If offering the subscription, like coming to the table and still trying to potentially stick to your guns, but saying, hey, we'll actually offer you a less expensive subscription, which will lengthen the time that you have it. to lessen the price of it, which will lengthen the time that it'll last. But you can maintain, let's say you pay a fee up front from that savings that you create for us to educate you and your staff how to do it so that you don't have to take the hit and like fire all these employees and be potentially faced with an issue later of, okay, now we're short a bunch of employees. And then, like kind of circling back to the whole staffing issue, it's kind of like a cyclical thing. I feel like that happens with especially like local governments. But does that make sense? Like offering a cheaper subscription price for a longer time with this perhaps a fee from that savings that they get to just educate their staff so that they can do it themselves. And I mean, you would provide, it sounds like it's very software based instead of hardware based for the most part, with the exception of replacing bulbs. So they could just still do the software, but they would be doing the harder, groundwork. The government would still be doing the harder ground. Does that seem like something you guys would be down with, or like that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Taylor.
It goes back to more of like the sustainable future for
Yeah.
sure, not, getting rid of employees to put more higher level of technology into the business, So I agree with that.
I think what you said, I think it would cover both the strategy doing the first one, the hybrid one too, and then the subsidiary too. I think what you said would cover both the strategies, because if you go to low pricing, it would cover the subsidiary, because you can get all the maintenance and everything in the strategy. And going for the hybrid one, you can still get you can still get the money that it's down, but paying a lower price. So I think it would be a good idea to go for both of them.
Yeah.
That would cover both the ideas.
Okay.
I agree that a hybrid model would be good because, like
Thank you.
someone said earlier, if like you don't have the funding um, to have like workers there that can maintain the equipment, then it would be better to have because you don't want to fire them, so you could have the option to buy it. But then if you want more support for the product itself, it's better to have the subscription model, and they would have an option to choose that. It would, I believe they said it would be less expensive for the subscription. So I feel like it would, you can list the benefits of having a subscription, and then it just gives the customer more options. But I think being able to advertise a subscription, having more support, I feel like the customer would see that being more beneficial in the long run. But yeah.
Okay, it's a selling proposition that you've got to go in and educate, and you don't want to queer the one deal you got on the if come, that if we could convince them. So for all of you, I don't think many people's jobs are in jeopardy, because it's very, very difficult to get rid of somebody who's in a government job. I guess I kind of am evidence of that.
Even with like public works, like maintenance work, so to speak, like are those not, well, I'd hate to say one job is more expendable than the other, but like arguably speaking, is it a bit more expendable than somebody who works probably in an office, so to speak?
I think that you're going to find that most everybody is pretty well protected, probably too much so.
Oh, okay. I didn't consider that.
So, but it's something to be aware of, and you're going to get pushback from people who are in the job, that they don't want to put their job at risk, even though it may not really be a sincere risk. I don't know that we've lost anybody at the university because of COVID. And there's a lot, I would imagine there are probably some service people that might have been in the maintenance staff or working in the food service, for example, where there just is no food service and there's no need to, the cleanup is much lower than it would be if all of you kids were there.
Right. Making a mess and all that.
So, but otherwise, I think they've kept everybody else pretty much there. I'm sure we have a police force there, and I'm sure that they're all there, although at this point, the only problem would be vandalism. Who else has any ideas here? This is a good time to be adding to your grades.
I just feel like the customers right now just do not see the value in their subscription. And I think you just can't force a customer to see that. And if they don't see the value, then they're not gonna buy it. And if they can't convince Houston to purchase this order in the subscription model, then what makes them think they'll be able to get more business that way? I feel like you have to sell what the customer wants,
That's
not
an,
what you want it.
that's an interesting point, Jose, that ultimately, do we have a right to tell the customer how to use the product? Are they free once they purchase it to use it or not use it in any way they wish?
They do. However, the case study kind of goes in depth about that's exactly what they're doing, and that's the problem. So these lights aren't being utilized the proper way. You're going down the street and you see flickering lights. These people aren't maintaining the lights. They're not updating the systems. And because of that, they're not providing the company image. Like the company wants to make safer parks and safer streets. And the way they're doing all this, like if, for example, if they just want to, if we're just selling just to make the profit, the company's going to plummet. You know, no company that's huge right now has succeeded the way they've succeeded because they're just looking for the best ways to sell. No, it's because they have a morale around the company. They have a consistent message throughout. And like he says, you can't force someone to buy something. So if you lay out all the benefits, you lay out all the features, and they still don't see it, then that's their loss, in my opinion.
I think that's a very valid point, but I think that everything takes time. You can't just all of a sudden just say, boom, subscription model right now. Either buy it or leave.
That's true, but Houston lagged. They lagged for years, so they're behind.
You should have like a flexible business strategy rather than being just this way or just the highway.
Okay, but let's see, what would Nago say about being consistent, or was it Rapallo? Rapallo said that.
That was me.
Consistency. And Jose, this is just the opposite of consistency.
I do value consistency, but I feel like they're gonna lose this purchase, and I feel like you need. I mean, for the results of a business, you need profit in order to survive. You don't want to go bankrupt either just by trying to prove a point.
But also considering that they maintained a $30 million revenue in the year prior.
Mhm.
You're considering now, again, longevity, because you don't want to be, it's not get rich quick. It's get rich, stay rich, and let's stay rich and then cash out when we sell our company, because you want to get to like that finishing point. Apple's been around for like what feels like ages. Google, like a lot of the Microsoft, all these companies have made it this long off the premise that it's been consistent in growth, consistent in development. Now they did make the switch arguably pretty like suddenly, because you're switching from purchasing to subscription, which in my personal opinion, I wouldn't have done it that way. I would have created the capability to purchase to a certain date to create the demand for those who solely want to purchase and not want to be involved in subscriptions. So you're creating the demand for people who are like, oh, dang, like we want these lights, we need to get them, let's get them now while we can purchase them without the commitment of a subscription, because that's not what we want. And you're still going to be able to get the market of like the people who want to subscribe, and that's significantly more consistent revenue. Because think about it, it took them 5 years to get a $3 million deal. 5 years to get a $3 million deal. If they knew that the selling purchase wasn't, or the selling strategy wasn't working, give yourself a deadline, market that deadline. Hey, a year from now, we will be enacting a subscription-based strategy or structure. We will no longer offer purchases. We're happy to make deals along the way, but upon that date, we won't be doing it anymore. bet you anything, Houston would have got fire up under their butt, did some budget cuts elsewhere, and probably would have got that deal 3 years in as opposed to 5. So like, I feel that, but consistency is about like longevity. You can't like be like, it isn't, it's my way or the highway, but it's also like, I'm not gonna alter what I'm doing for the benefit of my business every time somebody wants to write me a big check. You kind of have to like maintain that, you know, like that backbone, because people will just walk all over you because they have money. Some people believe anything can be bought, and you can't always concede to that.
Well, did you ever see the movie Aviators? The Aviator? It's Leonardo DiCaprio. It's just a couple years old.
Don't think so.
Huh?
I said I don't think so, but Leonardo, I would love to watch it just for Leonardo. Great actor.
Okay. Well, it's about a man named Howard Hughes, and he was kind of in a way, I'm going to call him an agent of the government. He set up an aircraft company, ultimately became an aerospace company, and it was essentially all financed by the government. He was an incredible eccentric. He lived in Los Angeles. And when I first came out here to California, it was with a company that had a deal, was working on a deal that we were on for about 6 months to sell a software product to his company. And that was called Hughes Aircraft. It was a huge company at that time. What we were doing was writing our little company was writing a software conversion system to take heavy duty programs from a GE computer, which at that time was a really big computer company, and this was one of the biggest systems they had, into an IBM computer. And this was what we were trying to do, was to be able to take pieces of their programs and convert it automatically from one language to the language of one company's product to the language of a second. And it was incredibly difficult, and we were able to get to the point where we could give them something to do a beta test on. And I guess you all know what a beta test is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we allowed them to take this, and for every subroutine, and everything was done in those days in subroutines, because there was no capacity within the machine to handle a lot of computing power. So what you do is you execute an instruction, then go out and get a subroutine, bring it back, execute that instruction, put it out, grab a third subroutine. So it did a lot of back and forth. And so what our product would do would allow them to put in any subroutine, and it would convert it into the IBM equivalent with a high degree of accuracy. And we agreed upon a price during the beta test site of $5 a shot. And at the end of the beta test point, where we got the product to what we thought was a reasonably good product to be sold on a basis where they could buy the whole thing, buy as much of it as they wanted. And we went in to renegotiate the price. And I learned something. Your first price is your price. It doesn't make any difference how low you went. You can't get that price back up. And so they said, well, why we were suggesting, I think it was about $10 a shot when they would go live with this product. And they said to me, well, why would we pay $10 for what we can get for $5? And I said, because we won't sell it unless you do. That was the essence of it. And they said no. And our company shut down. Now, did I do the right thing or not? Do I get any stars for being willing to stand my ground? Or was I a damn fool? I would probably do the same thing again, although I think I made the wrong decision.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So, like with Lumiscape, or with that being the case, like if you didn't want to necessarily hurt your brand or anything, couldn't you? And maybe it's just me just venturing off and reaching too much, but couldn't you have made like another branch or another sector with like a different name that still used Lumiscape's street lights, but sold and did things differently, but it still was managed by Lumiscape? So like pretty much a different company, but it was still ran by Lumiscape.
Like
But
a
it was a different brand, but it still sold the exact same things produced by the same manufacturer. But it's like I said, just sold differently. One was a subscription, one you could actually go in there and buy it.
So with that, it says it in the case study, like if it's a government buying, they're gonna go with the least resistant, which is a straight buy. So essentially, you doing that, you're putting Lumiscape, the original Lumiscape, out of business, and they're all just gonna convert to whatever branch is just selling straight sell instead of subscription. So that's the only problem with that. It's like this is your target, and you're literally taking them elsewhere because they're gonna go for the straight buy.
Mhm.
I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was trying to say like maintain, like kind of create like a sister company. So like hypothetically, like you have
Yes.
Lumiscape, which is just subscription, and then you have Lumi, let's just call it Lumi for argument's sake.
Mhm.
Lumi that's purely structured off of purchasing. But I do see what Rapallo's saying, because you do kind of like shoot yourself in your own foot by doing that, because it's unless you do some like really marvelous branding, like differentiation from the two, and
Mhm.
kind of don't even make them seem like they're affiliated, you are kind of shooting yourself in your own foot, because people are just going to go purchase. They're going to be like, screw a subscription, now I have to deal with a monthly bill. Like they're not going to, you see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like, I see what you're saying. Like it
Mhm.
on paper it definitely makes sense, but like long term, again, longevity, I don't know if we're
Yeah.
going to
Yeah, because
see.
like I said, I was thinking it was gonna probably be a little bit of a reach, but I was thinking pretty much like, yeah, like if necessarily the customers come in and they just say, hey, like we don't want to do your monthly subscription, then maybe you could like, you're like, all right, well, we do have this little side company over here that we could just send you off. And like I feel like they will only do that, and like unless it was something like Texas that happened where it's like they just don't want to do a subscription, where it's like, all right, we're not getting this sale, they're not going to do the subscription, let's send them to Lumi. And then
Mhm.
that's when Lumi would come in and then kind of just, but like how you said, it has to be a lot of differentiation, it has to be a lot of stuff that comes into it. Sounds
Yeah.
good on paper, but
It creates
yeah,
complexities that most people, I feel like, aren't even down to try to approach at the gate.
yeah.
But at that point, for what? Because at the end of the day, Lumi sells to, let's just say, Houston. You guys are all the way back to square one, where the point of the subscription is to maintain the lights. Let's just
Mhm.
say Houston buys from Lumi and not from Lumiscape. But for what? If the whole problem is going to go back to maintaining the lights,
Yeah.
keeping the, you know what I mean?
And that was kind of circumcised. That's why I told him, I was like, in some case or concept of it, you're shooting yourself in your own foot, because you are going back to straight to square one. Because now you're like, you go back to go check on them, and you're like, dang, they're still super sucky, and the street lights are still not on. They're still not putting the right bulbs in the light. Like it's redundant, because it's like we cleared 3 mil, but now it's like we cleared 3 mil for what? For it to still be in a situation where we were at. Like it's like it
Exactly.
like that's why we both agree, like it's like, yeah, it was solid on paper, but it's just like it's just complex in a way that is not even freaking worth the time, I feel like.
Mhm.
Yeah. And
Uh,
then I was thinking, let's just say they don't make the deal with Houston. They say no because they want a subscription. They say no. They lose the 3 mil, and then Houston still has 1,000 streetlights that are still, so even trying to convert those into subscriptions after they said no for the 5,000. What makes you think Houston's going to want to convert those 1,000 light bulbs that they have already to a subscription, even though they already denied the 5? I wouldn't think.
Yeah, I think Andrew said that too, because he was like, isn't there still people that already own it? Like, what are we gonna do about the people that own their streetlights outright? Like, we can't be like, hey, double back really fast, we're not gonna give you your money back, but also let's do a subscription. Like it's just not gonna add up. But even like circling back to what the professor said with regard to his company, I don't know if that was like a mistake, because you're not going to know if somebody's going to take, like, you're not going to know unless you ask. Like, that's that kind of like ultimate golden rule. Like, yeah, you could get it for 5, but are they, it's kind of like you get what you pay for, you know what I mean? Like, and now maybe for them it was cost effective in that moment. For all we know, though, it was damaging to them in other components of the way that their business or that their codes were being translated. Maybe the codes weren't being translated as efficiently as your program might have provided for $5 more. And for me, like kind of how you asked me about like the tickets when we were talking about like airplanes, I'd rather pay more for a more comfortable flight, for like knowing that my baggage is going to get there. I'd rather pay for it and have a guarantee of certain things that I'm paying for than be like, well, I know I can get the same thing but for cheaper, because yeah, the plane's flying in the same direction, but it's not the same experience. So like I don't think you messed up in that, but that's just natural, like you live and you learn business.
Yeah.
Like just restructure at that point.
Yeah, you get a lot older when you go through that a couple times.
Right.
But Brianna, I want you to hang on to that thing about the cheap airfares versus the dear airfares, because in a couple of weeks we're going to come back and look at Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
One of the things that's going to come up, Zachary, is I'm going to talk at some point, if I haven't already, about Continental Airlines and Continental Light. And if you might mark that down, because I want to bring that up when we are looking at Southwest. And the concept is called straddling. That people really don't know where you are. And it's like I describe it as going down the hill on your skis and the skis start going apart. And what do? You can't get them back into where they're getting parallel again. They take off and you end up on the ground. This has been a good discussion, and we've gotten a lot of people involved. I want you always to be involved in these class sessions, because you've got ideas that I don't have, and I think we can all learn from each other. I don't know that I got many more shots to get up at bat at my age, but you all have got a lot of them ahead of you, and the more kinds of discussion like this that you have, where you have to balance a bunch of different alternatives, the better you can deal with that, the more effective you're going to be, and the higher value you're going to have in your job. Now, let's see. There was something I'm going to say, but that's the other thing, that at my age, things kind of get away from you, and I'll think of it tonight when I'm ready to go to bed. But I know what it was. The board of directors, they were mentioned in there. And this is a responsibility that we haven't brought up in this conversation. But what do you do if you present this to the board of directors and say, we want we're going to take the $3 million deal, and they say, well, this is crap. You spent all this time putting together a new strategy, and now you're going to walk away from it? Or you may say, well, we walked away from it and left $3 million on the table. And they may say, well, look, we'll save that money by letting you go, and we'll get somebody to replace you. So there's always the dilemmas. Nothing is free in this world. Tanstaffel is what they call it. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. So you will have to face these dilemmas as you go through your career. And this is why we are doing this, to make you stronger, so that you can go out and have debates and present your arguments in a successful way. Let's see. Next class. We're going to be talking about core values, and we're now really going to get into how to set up a good, effective strategy, and what all of the things are that we need to think about it. And I got one other thing before I let you go. I said about straddling. Zach talked about straddling. One of the other things we're going to learn about is you can get so good in one area and try and set up that second company in another area. sometimes it's essential to do that. And an example that we're going to take a look at some point before you all graduate is Toyota. Now, Toyota kept getting better and better cars when they initially came in with crap cars, but they kind of built up the quality as time went on. But then when they wanted to move into the really high-end market to compete against Mercedes, they had to set up a separate company, and that's called Lexus. General Motors tried to do this as well. They saw that they needed to have something that would compete better. And back probably about 2003, 2004, they set up an entirely new company to take a different approach. And that was called Saturn. And it was highly successful, but General Motors itself got in such financial difficulty, they ultimately scuttled that brand. But it was an attempt to do just what you're suggesting, where we want to sell product. We want to get that money, and we don't care whether they ever install them. And then the other side of it, how do we address this where you're selling, and we didn't mention this either, but you're selling soft benefits. And those are very hard to sell. How am I going to convince you that there's money from having people to be safe in the park at night? How can I tell you how we're going to save money when somebody doesn't trip and fall because the street was dark? And you've got that's a different kind of selling that you have to do, but obviously it would be part of what you would want to be able to do. So we'll talk about, in fact, I'm going to put out an assignment to you tonight for the next, and this is a very simple one, but it's going to be tough. I want you to come up with what you believe to be your core values. What is important that drives you? And it could be things that are all very soft and fuzzy, like to be kind to people, to always tell the truth, to work hard. But they also could be things that are kind of edgy. I want to make money, that my goal is to make the money when I can make it. Or I want to respect people, but I also want to get ahead. And so if I have to step over people, I'm willing to do it. And I'd like to have you get about 4 or 5 of those values, whichever ones they are, or if they're a mixture of those, and write those down, and I'll put an assignment out so you can submit it as an assignment. And at least I'll have those to know that you've had to think about it. But we'll go into that in great detail in the next class. Okay. Thank you for making my job easy today. When you get involved, you get to do the sweating. I don't have to.
No problem. Glad we could help today.
Okay,
Glad.
good. Well, I'll let you all go home then, or go to the next class, whichever.
All right. Have a good one, Professor. Thank you.
All right.
Bye, have a good one.
Professor.
Bye-bye.
Professor, and the core values, are we submitting those or just